But please do understand, Sri Lanka's economic problem is not an IMF created problem. It is a problem primarily due to ill-advised, highly politicized government policy. So it's not the fact that IMF needs to come into Sri Lanka. We needed IMF support to stabilize the country. Basically speaking, our policies will have 5 major emphases. So we will have a national circular built environment framework. Now this is very important. If you look at various countries, if I may give you some examples of countries that have embarked on the National Circular Economy Program. I think countries such as Finland, Denmark, Singapore, Netherlands, and even Rwanda, they have adopted circular economy solutions. So I think that's an innovative step that Sri Lanka has to embark upon. Second, I think it's very important to provide affordable housing for the so-called missing middle. There are large numbers of the middle class and all other sectors of society who have the urgent need for housing. So that would be the second precept of our policy. Third would be urban master planning and decongestion reform. Master planning that is smart, master planning that is progressive, master planning that is futuristic. Because we have seen with successive governments and administrations, they have a very short-termist outlook, very limited viewpoint. I think we have to think afar. Next, we would revitalize the domestic construction ecosystem. As you know very well, present indicators have shown that the construction sector contributes to approximately 6 to 7% of GDP, and approximately 1 million people are directly and indirectly involved in this particular sphere. There is a tendency among certain economic experts to ridicule and devalue the construction sector. I don't belong to that group. I believe that the construction sector, the built environment sector, is indispensable to promote Sri Lanka's economic growth. The fifth aspect that we would embark on is a mechanism for green public procurement mandate that will promote green development. So what are the ground realities? The ground reality is we have very, very limited fiscal space. We are managing in a very constrained environment. There were certain figures that were mentioned, well and good, but how much of the allocated funds through the budget reaches the respective ministries as they impress? The government should be an enabler, a facilitator, a provider of a propitious and fruitful environment for growth to take place. So we need to have a proper policy, a land reform policy for urban development. That is not going to cost money. Every Monday sessions that President Premadasa had with potential investors in the 200 garment factory program, he spent only half an hour. He just did one simple thing. He opened his diary, gave a date for the inauguration of the factory, and everything else followed. Allocation of land, provision of tax relief, provision of infrastructure, water, electricity, etc., etc., etc. Allocation of quotas, because at that time the multi-fiber agreement was in place, and there were quota allocations for the garments industry. So, I mean, there are some nice words, one-stop shop, ease of doing business. I mean, it's all nice words. These all have to be translated into action. And we need to have structures and mechanisms that achieve these targets. So, with great respect, I think the future growth trajectory is not government-led. It is private sector-led, but government acting as the enabler and the facilitator.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, if I may interrupt for a second. No, could you also touch upon the anti-corruption suggestion and also in better platform on engaging the stakeholders? I would like you to also comment on it very briefly.
So to be very honest, digitizing the whole system and ensuring that accountable and responsible procedures are put in place to enhance transparency, accountability. Those structures have to be put in, but that alone will not spur growth. In order to spur growth, the respective governments, administrations, they have to champion it. Mere talk, declarations, nice speeches that gain the oohs and the ahs of all of you, that will not enable Sri Lanka to achieve the growth rates which are very, very important for us to start repaying our foreign debt in 2028. Please do remember, we have to maintain a 5% growth rate. 25, 26, 27, to start repaying into 2028. Others will be bankrupt for the second time. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're one of the experts. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have basically tried to create a feel-good factor, a temporary feel-good factor for all of you all by saying, oh, the IMF agreement and everything else will sort out these issues. Are you going to tell me with the projected growth figures for this year, 3.5%, next year, 3.1%, there's going to be a huge growth shortfall. And what I'm worried about is a repetition of 2022 in 2028.
Thank you.
And absolutely nothing is being done. There's absolutely nothing to spur the private sector. Private sector is the engine of growth.
IMF, whether we can renegotiate and improve the aggregate demand as a solution. Second is on how are we going to sustain the existing infrastructure rather than building the new infrastructure. Everyone was talking about the new infrastructure. Third one is again like whether we can take these anti-competitive concerns in the parliament. It is not the anti-corruption, it is the underpricing and only certain contracts being given only for certain bidders. So can we take up at the parliament? On top of that, final, as a moderator, I think I have the right to at least put one more point, that is on the cost side. As I think we mentioned about it, but as we all know, our tiles are being at a tariff rate of about 82%. Our steel is at very high price, and these are all front-loaded costs, because when you start with the steel, your cost is very high. So as on cement, so as on so many other construction materials. So with that, I would like to wrap up again. IMF, whether we can renegotiate to improve aggregate demand, sustainability whether we can sustain the existing infrastructure, and on the anti-competitive practices, and on the cost front. Shall we have a fairly brief answer? I know it's a lot, it's a loaded question, but unfortunately I'm running out of time at the same time. Over to you, Honorable Premadasa sir.
So, all of us who are here, we want our country to be prosperous. We want growth to take place. So when you talk of growth from the perspective of an economist, the gentleman mentioned about aggregate demand. So that's the Keynesian methodology of resuscitating the economy. But then you have the monetarist approach also, the Milton Friedman, Adam Smith approach. That is, you tinkle with the interest rate and money supply, and then you try to encourage economic growth. Now, we personally believe in a mixture of both. But right now, for the aggregate demand management policy of John Maynard Keynes to be implemented, we don't have adequate fiscal space. So we have to be very prudent in our government capital investments to ensure that such investments give the country the greatest possible return. Here again I go back to the private sector being the engine of growth, and we need to provide the maximum amount of support and incentives, be it in terms of low cost finance, facilitation, ensure that the entrepreneurs have a level playing field. That is most important. We have heard of many instances where various corporates have been given preferential treatment. Level playing field is also very important to create competition, growth and value for your services. So I'm not going to address all of the issues because I want to be fair by my colleagues who are here. So as far as the IMF issue is concerned, we have to take both a Keynesian and a monetarist approach, and certainly we can try to renegotiate, and we must do that. That is most important. But please do understand, Sri Lanka's economic problem is not an IMF created problem. It is a problem primarily due to ill-advised, highly politicized government policy. So it's not the fact that IMF needs to come into Sri Lanka. We needed IMF support to stabilize the country. We have to be fair. But while enlisting IMF support, we must make sure that people have a decent standard of living, that there are opportunities for growth to take place, that the various conditions that we have to abide by, those targets have to be achieved in a manner that is fair, that puts the least amount of burden on the citizens of our country. So we have to work within the IMF framework, no doubt about that. You can't go away from that. That's why I said, let's not talk of so-called type of thinking that is done in cloud 9. We have to come down to earth. We have to look at the reality. We have to look at the practicality. But working with the IMF, with the citizens' rights in mind, not only political and civic rights, their economic rights, their social rights, and their right to life.
මේ තමයි වයඹ පළාතේ පැවැත්වීමට නියමිත විශාලතම ඇසළ කලාපය. ශ්‍රී රත්න සෙවණ විහාරස්ථාන විහාරාධිපති ශ්‍රී එළුවාපිටියේ මහින්ද හිමිගේ සංකල්පය මත බංගදෙණිය එක්සත් තරුණ බෞද්ධ සංගමය මගින් ප්‍රථම වරට තමයි මේ ඇසළ කලාපය සංවිධානය කරනු ලබන්නේ. 2025 ජූලි මාස 10 වෙනිදා සිට 19 වෙනිදා දක්වා පුරාදින 9ක් ඇසළ තොරණ නාට්‍ය සල්පිල් මල්බදුන් මෙරිකෝ රවුන්ඩ් කතරෝන්චිල්ලා මාරකලින්ද භක්ති ගීත පහන් කූඩු ඇතුළු තවත් අංග රාශියක්. දිනපතා දන්සැල් ජාති ආගම් කුල ભેදයකින් තොරව ඔබ සියලුම දෙනාට ඉතාම ගෞරවයෙන් යුතුව ආරාධනා කරනවා ඔබත් පැමිණෙන්න වයඹ පළාතේ අති දැවැන්ත ඇසළ කලාපය නැරඹීමට.